And now we have our, well, technically our last guest, but our second to last speakers slot, because we're going to hear from Scott just at the very end of the day with a bit of an update as to the state of the industry. But before that, we have Nina. Nina, how are you doing?
Good morning, Alex. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I understand that you are international. So, of course, you are, what time is it over with you at the moment?
6:40 a.m.
That
I'm
is
up
dedication for you, isn't it? 6:40 a.m. I didn't even realize there was a 6:40 in the morning. I just thought it happened once a day, somewhere towards the end of, after work. But are you all prepared to dazzle us with your presentation?
I am indeed. Let me see if I can find the right screen to share.
Always useful.
Okay,
And
right.
there we go, where we can see that all the slides, and now we can just see the presentation. That is fantastic. Nina, please take it away and tell us all about bed bugs.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak here, and I figured it would be worth talking about the US experience with the bedbug resurgence because, in the US we were kind of ahead of the resurgence that's occurring currently in Europe, and we've learned a lot over the past 10 to 15 years about how to manage bed bugs. And I figured it would be worth talking about what we've learned so that you get a jump on that and you don't have to learn the mistakes or you can learn from the knowledge that's been created in response to the resurgence in the US. So, essentially in the US, we started seeing this growth in bed bugs in the early 2000s, and pest management professionals, PMPs, they were really kind of alarmed because they hadn't been dealing with bed bugs for many years. It sort of skipped an entire generation of pest management professionals. And so nobody really had any experience or training in bed bug management, but suddenly they're being called out and asked to deal with bed bugs. In addition, there were very few products that actually had bed bugs on the label. Bed bugs hadn't really been an issue, so manufacturers were not labeling or not using bed bugs as one of the target pests on their labels. So it meant that PMPs had very few products that were available to them to use to address this. There was already a historic resistance to DDT, which is in exactly the same mode of action group as pyrethroid insecticide, so deltamethrin. And deltamethrin was one of the big, products that was still labeled for bed bugs, but there was already resistance in the population from previous use of DDT because it's in the same mode of action class. And of course, very few people were researching bed bugs and their biology and behavior. So all of that knowledge had to be sort of generated and disseminated to the industry over a period of time to enable them to get together the tools to be able to manage this pest effectively. So if we just start with, the basics of bedbug biology, and, you can look this up in books, but there's nothing like sort of in-person training like we're doing now, where you can actually get an understanding of what the important parts are. So basically, bed bugs only feed on blood, and that's mostly humans, but they will feed on mammals, family pets, if, it's particularly in very high infestations. And they'll also feed on birds. And in the US, there's a pretty major problem of bed bugs in poultry houses. And that can run rife and be really extremely problematic because the birds are there the whole time. They're kept in those environments for over a year, for example, if they're egg laying, and the bed bug population can really increase. And there are so many nooks and crannies in these huge facilities where the bed bugs can hide. And of course, they've got easy access to blood. But anyway, if a human is present, and we can go back to houses now, bed bugs will take a blood meal once or twice a week, and they're stimulated to move by the carbon dioxide or the elevated levels of carbon dioxide that are emitted by people when they are in the home environment. But in the absence of human activity. Bed bugs can also survive up to a year. They're like bears in winter. You know, they'll go and hibernate, and you know, they don't need to use very much resources, and they can survive a long period of time without feeding. So we can't move out of houses and hope the bed bugs will go away, because they're just waiting there. And it's a really important element that we need to consider when we're working with bed bug management. Yeah, there are 5 immature life stages. The bed bugs, they just get gradually bigger. Females can apparently lay up to 200 eggs in a lifetime. And of course, they reproduce by this traumatic insemination process. I want to just look at the life cycle just briefly, because there's really one take-home message here. If we look at this going anti-clockwise, when a bed bug hatches out of an egg, and it can take up to 14 days depending on the temperature, they have to feed, they have to take a blood meal in order to be able to move on to the next stage. So they'll digest that blood meal, shed their skins. You know, if you work with bed bugs, you've seen the shed skins. They then become a second instar. That second instar only has one job. It has to find a blood meal so that it can take on that nutrient source, grow, shed its skin, and move on to the third instar. So every single life stage is dependent on a blood meal. And this is really important because it means we know where the bed bugs are going to be. So they may be extremely good at hiding, but we know they've got to come out for blood. And as long as there's human activity in the room, those bed bugs are going to come to it. So really, there are 3 important things to bear in mind when you are addressing a bed bug infestation. A, they must take a blood meal to move on to one life stage to the next. They will go dormant in the absence of human activity. So empty apartments or empty properties are really hard to deal with, as are sealed bags where bed bugs don't get exposed to elevated levels of carbon dioxide, or they can't get out. So you can seal bed bugs into an environment and they'll sit there and wait until they're released, because they can survive for months without feeding. So those are the 3 critical things to remember. The other thing we also need to understand is that, well, I think we all understand this, but our clients often don't, is that bed bugs don't emerge out of dirt. Bed bugs have to be introduced into the environment before they can establish. And an introduction will just be a single bed bug, or possibly even 2 or 3 males. And if there's no reproduction, they will remain as an introduction, even if they're feeding on the human host. But as soon as we get a breeding population, we'll get establishment of an infestation, which will then grow and will then spread. And this spread is really important to understand when you are working in multi-unit apartment blocks. We call it multifamily housing in the US. You know, we call them apartment blocks or blocks of flats in the UK. It's really critical to understand how easily bed bugs can move from one environment to the next in this kind of situation. So some work that was done by Rick Cooper in the US, in New Jersey, is really important in explaining this. So this entire apartment block, it had 3 levels, was infested. So every single unit in this apartment block was infested. But this red unit here on the top floor was the most infested that they could find. And what they did was they put out climb up interceptors into this red unit, and they collected as many bed bugs as they could over a few days. They ended up with 208 bed bugs, which they were able to take back to the lab, and they marked them in groups of, they divided them into groups of 3 and marked them either with a green dot, a blue dot, or a yellow dot. And they took them back to that red apartment and they released them in the areas that you can see there coded by the colors. And what they wanted to see is whether they could recapture those bed bugs in other units around that block. So those units were already infested, but they wanted to see if they could recapture the marked bed bugs in surrounding units. So they put up climb up interceptors everywhere. And lo and behold, in just 14 days, when they went back to inspect the climb up interceptors in the units around the red release unit, they found marked bed bugs across the hallway, either side and below. And unfortunately, that red unit was the top floor. And I bet if it hadn't been on the top floor, they would have been bed bugs above as well. So in just 14 days, they could recapture marked bed bugs that had been released in that red unit. And that tells us very clearly how easily bed bugs move in a multifamily unit situation like this. So if we want to address bedbug infestations, there are a number of rules that we have to follow. Of course, always we're going to correctly identify that we're dealing with bedbugs. We will investigate the source of infestation. And this comes into part of your customer education process. We can tell our customers, this isn't your fault. It is not due to bad hygiene. This is because bed bugs came into your environment somehow. Can you imagine how that happened? Was there a travel event? Did you go to Disney? Big problem in the US. Do you have an elderly relative that comes from a senior living facility? Also, major problems with bed bugs in these facilities in the US. So if your client can understand where the source of infestation came from, they can work with you to try and prevent that reintroduction. So part of the education, but also it engages the client in helping you to prevent an introduction from the same source where the original came from. You'll do a site assessment of a single family home or the whole building if it's a multifamily apartment block. Okay, we have to know every single unit and whether it was infested, because there's always people that aren't going to be telling us about it, and those bed bugs are spreading very rapidly. We'll then use appropriate products and techniques and always follow up, re-inspect and retreat until we achieve eradication. So I want to talk about customer prep, because when bed bugs started to resurge in the US, there was a protocol that became very commonplace that required massive preparation by the customers prior to treatment. And this was insisted upon by pest control operators because they wanted to be able to move around in the apartment and work around and be able to get to everywhere. But what we've learned is that actually it's much better to not have your customer prep, at least until you've gone in there to inspect the crime scene. And this is a crime scene. It's also my teenage son's bedroom, but it's a crime scene. And if we have the customer disrupt this crime scene, it makes it far more difficult for us to understand what's going on, how extensive the bedbug infestation is, and where the hotspots are. So by going in with no prep, we can actually see how the client lives. We can then, with their collaboration, say, okay, we need to clean up some of this because, I can't move around. And all of this bedding has got to be laundered on high heat because I can't treat that with my protocols. So the laundry is your job, but we're not going to ask the client to empty out all of their drawers and launder everything that's clean that they own and keep it in black plastic bags, bin liners, until we've cleared it of an infestation, because clients are very struggle to do that extensive kind of protocol, but it also risks that they're going to be packing bed bugs away in bags and maybe not treating those areas. So we want to keep that down to a minimum, because we don't need to get into every single drawer. We just need to be able to move around the room. So what we will do is we will do an inspection and say, okay, please, strip the bed, bag all of this bedding up. You need to dry it at high heat. It doesn't even need to be washed. It's the drying process that kills the bed bugs. Clothes on the floor, put those in a bag too, wash and dry those, and everything else can stay in place, because we can deal with this as long as we have good residual pesticides that at our disposal. So our client is now reduced to just these bags, which they need to deal with while we're treating their home, and everything else can stay in place. This is a much better way to work. We're going to go for a quick knockdown. And I know people love quick knockdowns. And the go-to for this was direct spray application. But in fact, this is not the best way to get quick knockdown of a bedbug population. Now, if you're a company that's lucky enough to have a whole house heat system, that can knock down the population very quickly. It doesn't leave a residual, so you'd still be advised to place a residual product down after the heat treatment, but that will do things overnight. I don't know whether the UK even has fumigation. Again, it's a very expensive process. But even without these techniques, we've got steam, vacuum, and direct spray as options for a quick knockdown. And my preferred option is always, always vacuum. So I'm going to harp on about this because vacuuming is so effective. If we look at this cluster of bed bugs, they're all layered on top of each other. If you were to spray that with a chemical insecticide, you will hit the top layer of bed bugs, but the ones below will not be hit. Okay, so this is not a complete treatment. And it's also assuming that there's no resistance to that spray that you're using as well. Much better to suck this up. If you suck it up with a vacuum, you're going to immediately remove all of the bed bugs. It leaves a great customer impression because all of the bed bugs have gone. They're not just left dying on the floor. There's no resistance to a vacuum. It removes all the layers. It removes the cast skins where the first instar bed bugs will hide for protection from desiccation, but will also be protected from spray applications. It means that we can now apply a residual product to a clean surface. And when we come back to follow up and reassess, if we see bed bugs in an area where we know we've removed them, then we know that we've got a problem. So it makes our whole process much more much easier. And if you're not convinced by vacuuming and you think, oh, but I don't want bed bugs in my vacuum, we have this little trick. I call it Deanie Miller's pantyhose hack because Deanie Miller showed me how well this works. It's a knee-high nylon stocking, and you put the toe end down the round nozzle of your vacuum. You fold it back over the outside and attach the crevice tool to that, and that traps that in place. You don't even know that it's there once you have applied it or once you've fitted it. But what it does is it traps all of the bed bugs, eggs, and everything that you suck up into that stocking, which you can then easily remove, tie in a knot, and show to housing managers how many bed bugs you've removed from that apartment just by vacuuming, and you can dispose of it appropriately. So it never contaminates your vacuum. You don't need to worry about it being leaking bed bugs into your service vehicle or taking bed bugs to your next client. So we've done the vacuuming. While we're vacuuming, we are inspecting, so we understand the extent of the infestation, and then we're going to apply residual insecticides to the surfaces that the bed bugs will be contacting when they're looking for a blood meal. So it's a sort of a strategic placement, but there's no requirement to empty all of these closets and things and get into the back of them because the bed bugs are going to come to your client. They must feed to move on to each life stage. So we don't have to chase them into all of the nooks and crannies. As long as we've got a good residual insecticide, we can get them when they come out. And by vacuuming, we've already removed 90% of the population. This is the hard 10% that we're now addressing. So the population has crashed. We've got that quick knockdown and we're doing the residuals. So we can also apply a little bit of assessment-based pest management, which means that you're going to apply, insecticide according to the level of infestation. We'll always vacuum. We can apply primary barriers around where people spend sedentary time, and then where necessary, extend those barriers to secondary barriers wherever bedbug activity is detected or suspected. So let's just do a quick run through of applying residuals around, typical furniture, around headboards. Just make sure that if there are bed bugs hiding, they've got to cross some kind of residual barrier to get to their blood meal. Box springs or divans, as we call them in the UK, you can treat those. I prefer an encasement for mattresses, but you can also use approved products for mattresses once you've vacuumed the bed bugs from those areas. Simple applications to sofas and chairs. You can go down the sides of the cushions as well. You can remove bed bugs from here. This does not need a pesticide application. Yeah, nightstands or bedside tables, these are also critical. Keep them away from the wall and the other bits of furniture so that you know that if bed bugs are in these drawers, they are going to cross barriers, both when they leave this furniture, but also when they crawl up the divan here. Powdered insecticides or dust insecticides such as DE or any insecticidal dust that you have available is really good at floor level and into cracks and crevices. And what you've probably noticed is that all of my examples are in beautiful houses or relatively beautiful conditions where you probably don't see very often. So we have demonstrated the efficacy of these techniques, even in some very serious social housing situations in Richmond, Virginia, where I worked with Deanie Miller and her team. So here, clients aren't really willing to prepare. There's so much clutter everywhere, it's ridiculous. We worked out that we could put down tape. I don't recommend masking tape. We found that very difficult to remove, but blue painter's tape is really good for this. You can cordon off all clutter and then spray this tape with your residual insecticide. Here's an example of that room after it's been taped up. I did sweep the rubbish away from this central area so that we could move these sofas around. People were sleeping on these sofas. They were hideously infested. We vacuumed them, sprayed them, sprayed the circumference of the room so that any bed bugs coming out of this clutter would get a dose. And lo and behold, 30 days later, we had no bed bugs in this situation. So this environment, very cluttered, very messy, was actually easier to deal with than this one. Similar, social housing situation. Kids were sleeping on mattresses on the floor here, and these mattresses were terribly, terribly infested, and we had to remove all of these bed bugs and eggs. A toothbrush works really well with this, with a vacuum for this. You can also use insecticidal dusts after the vacuuming to remove this. But the real issue with this, even after we'd done the residual insecticides on the areas around these mattresses, was whatever was in these boxes. And we had not understood that pretty much everything in these boxes had been packed away with bed bugs in. And unbeknownst to us, when we came back 30 days later to see how things were going, these mattresses were reinfested with bed bugs again. And the culprits were the toys that belonged to the kids. So those boxes were full of bedbug infested dolls with bedbug poop freckles, which were then taken into the bed, reinfesting the bed so that bedbugs were not, exposed to the barriers, but were able then to just colonize in the bedding and feed off the humans without ever crossing insecticidal barriers. So, you have to think out of the box when you get this kind of thing. We used ZapBug hot boxes. I don't know if these are available in the UK, probably something similar, but heat is very effective for toys and things like that, things that you can't really directly spray. Or you can put things in open containers and spray barriers around the outside so that the bed bugs will crawl out. Freezing is also a good method of treating these sorts of items. So yeah, bed bugs are easy. It's the people that are less predictable. And here's a list of items or situations that we have experienced. A part of our client base calls me up and tells me what issues they've been dealing with. So wheelchairs, walking frames, prosthetics can get very infested with bed bugs. And of course, these leave with your client when you're doing the treatment, and this is where you can be caught out because you may not be aware. CPAP machines for sleep apnea, stuffed animals like the dollies, purses, handbags, backpacks leave with the customer. Their cars may be infested. These boxes of stuff, shoes, people put the shoes on that could be heavily infested with bed bugs and leave their property while you do the treatment. Car seats, sex toys, those are things that you find in the top drawer, right, of the nightstand. Books that are taken to bed and read. Toenails. Yes, in a senior living facility, there was a gentleman that had bedbug infestations, like colonies under his toenails. So when he went to bed, he was reintroducing those bed bugs into his bed. GPS probation trackers. PJs and sweatpants, wigs, laptops. People work from home. Sometimes they work from bed, right? Those laptops can be infested. And if they go with the client and you're not aware that they're infested, these are the things that will literally come back to bite you. Are your clients cleaning away the residual? And, you know, in the US, we have people who sleep with gums under their pillow. And of course, they are also removed before you do the treatment. So all of these things, I'm collecting items for this list and adding to them on a weekly basis. So, you know, let me know if you've got any other examples. And then, of course, we've got resistance. Bed bugs resistant to, you know, pyrethroids, neonics, chlorphenapir, multiple ways of thwarting resistance, cuticle thickening, pathways, all of that. And a study that was done by Lewis et al. And published in 2023 just shows how significant this was in the US, where a bedbug survey conducted between 2005 and 2009 found that there were still wild type bedbugs that had no resistance in certain pockets of the US. But 10 years later, a similar survey conducted by other people, and it's not that these states were not infested, there was just no survey done, but in none of these surveys was a single wild type non-resistant bedbug found. And this is probably due to the fact that when bedbugs started emerging, the only options were for people to be spraying deltamethrin-based insecticides, the only things that they had available. They weren't doing it properly. They weren't you know, and ensuring that there was eradication. So we got this massive buildup of resistance. So the drivers of resistance, well, we know repeated applications of the same chemical mode of action, consumer use of off-the-shelf pesticides, which contributes to this, as do bug bombs, which do not work, by the way. So, you know, don't make any mistakes with that. Bug bombs do not clear bedbug infestations. PMP is not ensuring complete eradication, so those resistant bedbugs are moving on and sharing their resistance genes and establishing in new areas. And, you know, basically a lack of comprehensive bedbug management in apartment complexes, which will prevent you from ensuring complete eradication of a bedbug population. So effective resistance management, vacuuming, steam or heat, silica dioxide or diatomaceous earth, none of these have resistance mechanisms. Fungal pathogens, this is coming soon. You know, we developed Apprehend. It's now, you know, used very widely in the US and Canada. We have a European partner, Andermatt Biocontrol, who are registering Apprehend for use in Europe. You will see this soon. Mattress encasements. And then just, you know, be careful about using chemicals. Use ones that have mixed mode of actions to deal with, you know, resistance issues. Always confirm eradication. And just remember, apartment complexes have to be treated holistically, or you'll just chase resistant bedbugs around the complex forever. It'll seem like you're failing. So I'm not quite over time. So I want to thank you. I'm happy to answer questions. I know I rushed through all of that. I wanted to sort of give you the whole overview of the US experience and hopefully enable you to, you know, use what we've learned so that you can move forward with the resurgence that's currently, you know, occurring with more confidence that you know how to deal with them and what to do.
Oh, that was fascinating. I always love a good scientific paper, I have to say. And so I really enjoyed seeing those bits and bobs up. And I remember seeing one report coming out, must have been a decade ago, saying that a study in the States found that out of something like a population of, I think it was 30 populations they took out, they found 26 different mechanisms of resistance. And of that, some insects had up to 6 mechanisms in, you know, just one animal, making them what I think the colloquial and the technical term is little cruel, fill in the rest of the sentence there. So it's amazing. And of course, you guys have had a very close lens on this for a while. And it's fascinating to hear you talk about Apprehend as well, because that's something we don't have over here, but is something that is really novel. So for those who haven't heard about it, it's a fungal insecticide, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't have time to talk about it, but it's it's a fungal disease of insects that you spray as barriers, like I was showing on the slides. And when the bed bugs cross over those barriers, they pick up the spores like sand on wet feet. And the real advantage of apprehend is that they then go back to their harborage and spread them amongst the population by direct contact. So we get that additional action, which is really great. It will come to the UK and to Europe. I promise. You know, we've done everything we can to fast forward that. We're just waiting for the regulatory processes to go through their system.
There's absolutely no rushing a regulator. I think that's probably an axiom, there. But no, it'd be exciting to see. And so everyone, you're getting some real love in the comments here. It seems like we are, very much enjoying the bugs today. Anyone have any questions? Please do ask. But I think I'm going to let you off the hook. I'm not going to sit here and make you wait for them. If you want to drop your details into the chat, I'm sure people have a lot of questions for you, especially around training, especially around getting the edge on bed bugs, because it's just so apparently you have an absolute wealth of wonderful information there. And so with that, I'll say thank you ever so much. And I think we will, and unless you have anything further to add.
No, I'll look at any questions and I'll answer them online over the next 10 minutes or so. And I will, if I can find out how to reply to everybody, I'll put my email in so that people can write to me directly. Okay.
I'm sure Lauren will be looking in the background to guide you through the process
All
seamlessly.
right.
But
Thank you.
from that, thank you ever so much. Let's invite to the stage Mr. Scott Johnson. Come on, everyone. Cheer for him. Here he is. There he is. And if I am the updated version of Natalie, you are the updated version of Ian, aren't you? You're going to be taking Ian's role for the webinar today, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much, Alex, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Alex, for being such a great host. Thank you for standing in for Natalie. We really appreciate it. There he goes. Yeah, so Alex is standing in for Natalie today because Natalie is at Pest World this week, delivering a presentation there. And Ian is representing the UK at the Global Pest Management Coalition. So you're stuck with me. But thank you very much to all of our speakers today, particularly our sponsor, Insectaram. And thank you all for joining us on World Pest Day. I think there was about 205 of us here at peak. So it's great to see us all get together on World Pest Day for this very special forum. So I've got a couple of news and updates for you from across the sector. There is some breaking news updates that I've got as well for you, particularly around the glue board licensing scheme in England. So as some of you will know, we were very concerned with the scheme that Natural England and DEFRA proposed. It seemed to omit a lot of key areas where public health would be affected. So we've written to Minister Powell and the Secretary of State for DEFRA with a very strongly worded letter telling them exactly what our concerns and what our members' concerns are. And Minister Powell has acknowledged that she has changed her mind on a couple of areas. So individual licenses for glue traps will now be available for pubs, restaurants, supermarkets, and hotels. That does come with the caveat that this is still going to be in exceptional circumstances when there's an imminent risk to public health. And we suspect it is still going to be quite difficult to get awarded licenses for these particular locations. It's great to see that they've been added to the individual licenses. However, we would have much preferred to see them get added to the class licenses. Individual licenses need to be applied for ahead of time and therefore will require Natural England to give it the thumbs up before you're able to use it, which we think is going to be less than useful in an emergency situation where you need to use a glue board. So there's still lots of work for us to do there to try and influence DEFRA and Natural England. That's going to be more difficult now that a general election has been called. But we are still working our way in the background trying to get a resolution there. DEFRA has also confirmed that you will not be charged any fees for your glue board licensing application if it is unsuccessful. So that does mean you don't have to worry about trying to pay these very large fees if the application is unsuccessful. Again, we're still concerned that the fee is too high and it'll limit the sorts of businesses that are able to make use of these individual licenses. But again, we're working away at this in the background. They've also delayed the point in which that you can apply for a license, so by a week. So now you'll be able to apply for glue board licenses on the 19th of June, which is a week later than they initially stated. That's everything on glue boards for now. I will get an update up on the BPCA website, so be sure to have a look there for some more details on glue boards in England. We've got a couple of events coming up very soon. So we have a social event, an in-person social event in Reading coming up on the 13th of June. So it's a very informal evening in a pub with some beer, with some curry. It's open to members and non-members. So come along and meet other pest controllers in the area. If you want to register for that event, it's bpca.org.uk/events. Another event that we've got coming up is specifically for non-members. So we have an open evening about BPCA membership. That's another Zoom event like this. It's in the evening on the 18th of July. And if you're interested in learning a bit about BPCA, meeting some members and some volunteers at BPCA, or having some of your questions answered, that's the place to do it. Again, bpca.org.uk/events. Finally, so it is World Pest Day, and this World Pest Day, we've put out a manifesto for pest management. So the general election has obviously been called now in the UK. So we've created a document explaining to civil servants and politicians the vital role that pest management plays in protecting public health. It's a bit like a briefing document that gives a bit of an overview of our sector and the sort of things that we do to help protect citizens. But it also contains 4 key policy recommendations that BPCA members have put together as part of the work they do in our committees. So I'll go through those policy recommendations very quickly. There's 4 of them. There's a lot more detail in that manifesto document, and we'll be emailing out the manifesto document within the next hour or so. So you will be able to look at it in detail. But effectively, these policy recommendations are what we're going to be asking the government and civil servants to be looking at when we go out and talk to them. So our first recommendation is around developing a pest-safe scheme that will proactively help to protect homes from pest infestations. So we want to make it mandatory for landlords and social housing to have a pest-safe report from a pest control technician to say that a house, that a home is free from pest infestations before a new tenant comes in, and that's going to be called the Pest Safe Scheme. Our second policy recommendation is around chemical regulation in the UK. So post-Brexit, we now need all of our products, pest control products and chemicals, to be registered in the UK, but the fee structure for the registration scheme in the UK is comparable to that of the whole of the rest of the EU. So we're concerned that this will mean that we get less products, we get less innovation into the UK. So we're asking the government to review that fee structure to make sure that pest controllers on the ground have access to the very best products that are available around the world. Our third policy recommendation is going to be around restricting professional tools to professional users. So we hear a lot about unqualified people being able to get their hands on pest control professional products. We are going to be asking the government to set a minimum training standard and a commitment to pest controllers wanting to use professional pest control products. Our fourth and final policy recommendation is around the trust mark scheme. So the trust mark scheme is a government endorsed quality scheme of which all BPCA servicing members now have access to that register or on that register. So we want the government to encourage the use of the trust mark registration scheme, particularly amongst government-owned estates, wherever practically possible. So those are the four things that we're going to be talking to politicians about, probably in the next government. We will need the support of BPCA members to help set up those introductions with what probably will be a very different looking government after the election. So please do have a look at these policy recommendations, have a look at the manifesto. We've got a new page on the website, which is bpca.org.uk/policy, which is all about the manifesto and the things that we want to change in the UK. That's it from me. Thank you very much for joining us on World Pest Day, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye from everyone at BPCA.